I never thought I'd hear my own grandchildren told to eat scraps in my house. But that is exactly what happened one Sunday evening. One ugly sentence was enough to open my eyes to years of things I had chosen not to see. And when I finally acted, it shocked my entire family. What I did next changed everything about my legacy and the way my family will remember me. Before I tell you exactly what happened that night, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you've ever had to stand up to disrespect inside your own family, you'll understand why one throwaway comment at a dinner table could become the turning point of my life. My name is Anita Flint. I'm 70 years old, a widow, and a mother of 2 grown children, my daughter, Sarah, and my son, Michael. Sarah is my steady one, always responsible, dependable, and thoughtful. Michael is charming, but if I'm being honest, he has been spoiled most of his life. When my husband was still alive, he had a soft spot for Michael, and I often went along just to keep peace. I see now that wasn't the best choice. For years, I've hosted Sunday dinners. It's the one tradition I've clung to since my husband passed away. I don't live in a mansion or have staff. I have a simple home in Ohio, comfortable for me and warm enough for the family to gather. My goal was to keep everyone connected. Some weeks it worked. Some weeks it was tense. And then there was the week that ended everything we knew. That evening started like many others. Sarah arrived first with her 2 children, Ethan and Nora. Ethan is 11, a quiet boy who loves to read. Nora is 9, full of curiosity and kindness. They never come empty-handed. Sarah always insists on helping me with the food, even when I tell her not to. That night, she brought a salad and some homemade rolls. The children immediately offered to set the table. I watched them carefully place napkins and silverware without being asked twice. It reminded me of how Sarah was at their age, always mindful of others. Not long after, Michael pulled into the driveway with his wife, Jessica, and their 2 children, Landon and Paige. From the moment they walked in, the contrast was clear. Jessica carried no dish, only her designer handbag. Landon, who is 13, walked straight past me and flopped onto the couch, shoes and all. Paige, who's 10, started complaining that she was hungry before even saying hello. Jessica smiled like this was all normal. "Mom, I hope you didn't go to any trouble tonight," Jessica said, brushing her hair back. "We've had the busiest weekend." Sarah gave me a quick glance. She knew that Jessica rarely lifted a finger to help. I just smiled politely, as I always do, and said, "It's no trouble." But in truth, I was tired. My knees ache more these days, and long cooking sessions wear me out. So, I suggested something different. "How about we order pizza tonight? Keep it simple." Michael clapped his hands together. "Perfect. The kids love pizza." And that's when the evening began to unravel. Jessica pulled out her phone, as though she were placing an order for royalty. "Okay, Landon, what do you want?" Landon didn't even look up from his phone. "Pepperoni and sausage, double cheese. Make sure it's from Marino's, not the cheap place." Jessica typed it in dutifully, then turned to her daughter. "And you, Paige?" "I want extra cheese, no sauce, and stuffed crust. Oh, and breadsticks. Not garlic bread, the breadsticks with the dipping sauce." Jessica nodded again, making sure to write it down like a secretary. Then she added her own order: thin crust with artichokes, mushrooms, and olives. Michael, never shy, said he wanted meat lovers with a side of wings. I sat there quietly, waiting for them to include Sarah's kids. Ethan and Nora sat at the table, their hands folded, whispering to each other about what toppings they liked. Ethan loves plain cheese. Nora likes veggie pizza. They were so patient, so polite, just waiting to be asked. But then Jessica looked right past them. She didn't even glance their way. And she said, with a little laugh, Your kids can eat whatever scraps are left in the kitchen. They're not guests here. For a moment, I thought I must have misheard her. My ears aren't what they used to be, but I knew I'd caught it right. She said it clear as day. My daughter's children, my grandchildren, were told to eat scraps in their own grandmother's home. The room went silent. Sarah's face went pale, and she pulled her children closer. Ethan's eyes dropped to the floor. Nora's smile faded. Michael shifted in his seat, but said nothing. He didn't defend his sister. He didn't correct his wife. He just looked away. Something inside me cracked right then. I've lived long enough to know that families can be messy, but there are some lines you don't cross. You don't treat children like second-class citizens. Not in my house. Not anywhere. But I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just sat back, my mind spinning, because I knew at that moment that everything about my family was about to change. You see, that night wasn't just about pizza. It was about a pattern that had been building for years. The favoritism, the entitlement, the silence I allowed, all of it came to a head in that one cruel sentence. And while I kept calm on the outside, inside I was already making a decision that would shake my family to its core. I looked at Sarah, then at her children, and I thought, no more scraps. Not for them. Not for me. That Sunday dinner was the last time I stayed quiet. The moment Jessica told my grandchildren they weren't guests was the moment I realized I had been part of the problem by saying nothing all these years. And that night marked the beginning of my revenge. After that Sunday dinner, I couldn't sleep. I sat up in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over. My daughter's children, my own grandchildren, were told to eat scraps. And the worst part wasn't Jessica's words. It was Michael's silence. That silence carried the weight of years. It forced me to think about how we got here. About how two children raised under the same roof could turn out so differently. Sarah was my firstborn. From the time she was little, she carried herself with a sense of responsibility. She was the kind of child you could depend on without even asking. If I needed help with the dishes, Sarah was already standing at the sink. If her younger brother misplaced his shoes, Sarah was the one hunting for them. When she was a teenager, she worked summers at the local library, saving every dollar for college. Michael, on the other hand, was my husband's soft spot. My husband believed boys should be given freedom. So while Sarah followed rules and helped out, Michael was excused from chores with the excuse that he'll grow into it. If Sarah earned straight A's, it was expected. When Michael scraped by with B's, we were told to celebrate him anyway. I can admit it now. We spoiled him. Not with riches. We weren't wealthy people, but with lowered standards. He got away with more than he should have, because neither of us wanted to fight with him. It was easier to let Sarah carry the extra weight. Life went on like that for years. Sarah studied hard, earned scholarships, and built her own path. She became a school counselor, helping other children find their way. She never asked for much, just worked steadily, paid her bills, and raised Ethan and Nora with quiet pride. Michael took a different route. He bounced from job to job, never sticking with one place very long. He liked the image of success more than the work it took to get there. And when he married Jessica, that side of him grew stronger. Jessica is sharp-tongued and stylish. She believes in appearances above all else. The right car, the right shoes, the right vacations. When I first met her, I thought maybe she would push Michael to be more ambitious. And in a way, she did, but not in the right direction. She pushed him toward keeping up with people who lived beyond their means. Expensive restaurants, luxury clothes, trips they couldn't afford. Whenever Sarah came around, Jessica made little comments. "Oh, Sarah, is that your car? It's cute." Or, "Your kids don't do travel sports? That's nice, I guess." Always with a smile, always dressed up, always making Sarah feel like less. Michael followed her lead. He never said these things directly, but he laughed along. He let his wife belittle his sister, and he let his children learn the same behavior. I can see now that Sarah has always been the strong one. She reminds me of myself in the years after my husband passed. I became a widow at 60, and it wasn't easy. For the first time in decades, I had to manage everything on my own, the house, the bills, the quiet nights. But I made it work. My husband left me a small pension, and between that and Social Security, I live modestly but securely. I don't take lavish trips, but I don't go without heat in the winter either. Sarah never complains, but I know she and her husband budget carefully. They drive used cars, cook most meals at home, and save for their children's future. She told me once, "Mom, I'd rather live within my means than teach the kids bad habits." That stuck with me. Michael never talks about budgeting. He calls Sarah cheap behind her back. I know because he said it to me once when he thought I'd agree. "Mom, Sarah's so cheap. She should let her kids live a little. What's the point of working hard if you never enjoy yourself?" I didn't answer him at the time, but I thought about Ethan and Nora. They don't have the newest gadgets, but they always say please and thank you. They don't interrupt adults. They sit through dinner without phones in their hands. Sarah may not spend much, but her children shine in ways money can't buy. Meanwhile, Landon and Paige always seem restless. They want the newest sneakers, the newest phones, the next trip. Jessica brags about their private lessons and camps, but I notice how they talk back, how they treat people like their staff. It has created a painful contrast. Two sets of grandchildren, growing up under the same grandmother's roof, but living in two different worlds. And I can't pretend I haven't noticed how my own choices shaped this. I excused Michael when I shouldn't have. I thought love meant avoiding conflict, but avoiding conflict is what allowed Jessica to speak so freely in my home. It's what allowed Michael to sit silently while his children learned to treat their cousins like they were less. That Sunday night replayed in my head over and over. Sarah's children sitting politely, waiting to be asked. Jessica rattling off orders like a queen. And then that sentence, "They can eat scraps, they're not guests here." I realized how often Sarah had been dismissed by her brother and his wife. It wasn't just about pizza. It had been happening for years. When Sarah bought her first little house, Jessica laughed. "It's cozy," she said, glancing at the tiny backyard. "But where do you host parties?" When Ethan got an award at school, Michael brushed it off. Good for him. But it's just middle school. When Nora showed her drawings, Jessica compared them to Paige's expensive art lessons. One time, Sarah mentioned saving for Ethan's future college costs, and Michael scoffed. Why bother? Scholarships will cover it if he's smart enough. And if not, loans build character. That's the difference between my two children. Sarah thinks ahead. Michael assumes someone else will solve the problem. The truth is, Sarah has earned respect through years of hard work and steady choices. Michael has demanded respect without earning it, and I've allowed it far too often. That night, when Jessica said what she said, I finally admitted to myself that my silence had helped create this divide. For years, I thought keeping the peace was the right thing. But keeping peace in the moment often means losing respect in the long run. Now, at 70 years old, I finally understood something simple. Legacies aren't about money alone. They're about the lessons we pass down. And up until that night, the lesson I'd been teaching my family was that bad behavior would be tolerated as long as no one shouted. I didn't want that to be my legacy. Not for Sarah. Not for Ethan and Nora. The next morning, I woke up with a clear head. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and admitted to myself that I needed to make a change. Because if I didn't, the next generation would grow up thinking cruelty could be brushed aside and silence was the right response. And I wasn't going to let that happen. Once I admitted to myself that my silence had played a part in all this, the memories started rushing in. I could see a long string of moments that I had brushed aside. Each one small on its own, but together they painted the picture of favoritism that had been growing for years. Jessica was usually at the center of it. She loved to show off. I remember one Sunday she came in talking about how Landon had started private tennis lessons at the new sports club in town. The coach is expensive, but it's worth it, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then she turned to Sarah with that smile of hers. Do your kids play any sports? Sarah, who doesn't like to make excuses, just said they play at the park. We kick the ball around after school. Jessica raised her eyebrows and laughed softly. That's sweet, but they'll fall behind if you don't get them into something real. I saw Sarah's face fall. She brushed it off quickly, but I noticed I didn't speak up. I told myself it wasn't worth an argument over one comment. There was another time when Nora came in proudly holding a ribbon she had won at the school art fair. She showed it to Jessica, hoping for a little praise. Jessica took one look and said, "That's cute. Paige's art teacher says she has real talent, though we're already looking at programs for gifted kids." Nora's smile disappeared, and she folded the ribbon into her pocket. I should have said something right then. I should have told Jessica that you don't compare children like that, especially not cousins. But I kept quiet, thinking I'd keep the peace. Michael wasn't much better. He had a way of brushing Sarah off whenever she tried to share her struggles. When Sarah was working long hours and her car broke down, she told us she was stressed about how to manage everything. Michael smirked and said, "You're always so dramatic, Sarah. Maybe you're just jealous that Jessica, and I don't have those problems." Jealous. That was his word. As if Sarah was jealous of debt and pressure. As if she wanted to live on appearances alone. I sat at that table, listening, and I said nothing. I told myself that if I stepped in, Michael would only get defensive. Looking back now, I see how my silence gave them permission. Every time I let a comment slide, I was teaching Sarah that she had to endure it, and I was teaching Michael and Jessica that they could say whatever they wanted without consequence. Meanwhile, Ethan and Nora always tried to rise above it. Those two children amaze me. They don't interrupt. They help without being asked. When Ethan finishes eating, he carries his plate to the sink. When Nora sees I'm slow on my feet, she rushes to hold the door. I've had teachers in town stop me to say how polite and kind they are. Yet in our own family gatherings, those same children get overlooked. One Christmas stands out in my mind. Landon tore into a pile of gifts bigger than anyone else's, shouting about his new tablet and video games. Paige squealed over her designer shoes. Sarah's children opened their gifts carefully, thanking everyone for what they got, modest toys and books. But I noticed how Michael and Jessica barely looked their way. Jessica was busy snapping pictures of her own kids for social media. Michael was on his phone. Ethan tried to show Michael the book he got, one he had wanted all year. Michael glanced up for half a second and said, "That's nice, buddy," before going back to his screen. And what did I do? I smiled weakly and said nothing. I told myself, it's Christmas, don't spoil it with a fight. But in truth, the day was already spoiled by the message Ethan and Nora received, that their joy didn't matter as much. I could give you a dozen more examples. The family vacations Michael bragged about while Sarah quietly worked overtime to cover school clothes. Jessica's habit of telling Sarah, "Oh, you wouldn't understand," whenever the conversation turned to money or travel. The way Landon and Paige interrupt without correction while Ethan and Nora sit quietly, waiting their turn. Each time, I stayed out of it. I thought I was choosing peace. But really, I was choosing silence. And silence, I now see, teaches the wrong lesson. It tells the ones doing harm that they can keep going. And it tells the ones being harmed that their pain doesn't matter enough to be defended. That realization cut me deep, because I love all my grandchildren. But love without action isn't enough. Ethan and Nora deserve to know that they are valued, not just in the classroom, not just in their mother's eyes, but in this family. And Michael and Jessica's children need to learn that privilege and entitlement don't win you respect in the long run. It took that shocking sentence, "They can eat scraps," to finally wake me up. But the truth is, the pattern had been there for years. I just hadn't wanted to face it. I think about Sarah a lot when I reflect on all this. She never complained to me directly about how she was treated. She would brush things off and say, "It's fine, Mom. I don't want to make a scene." But I could see the weight she carried. She tried to shield her children, but children notice more than we think. They noticed when their cousins got praised for the smallest things, while their own efforts were dismissed. They noticed when their Aunt Jessica laughed at their clothes or hobbies. And yes, they noticed my silence too. I can't undo the past, but I can admit the truth. I failed them by not speaking up sooner. I thought I was protecting family harmony, but really I was protecting Michael and Jessica's pride at the expense of Sarah and her children's dignity. That night at the pizza table, the scales finally fell from my eyes. I saw the whole pattern clearly, and once I saw it, I knew I couldn't allow it to continue. From that point on, I promised myself something. No more silence. If I want my family to learn respect, I have to model it. If I want my legacy to mean anything, it has to reflect fairness. I was 70 years old, but I wasn't too old to change course. And I decided that night that I would. Have you ever stayed silent to keep peace, only to regret it later? Drop your story below. And if you believe silence can hurt just as much as words, hit that share button so more people understand this truth. By the time that Sunday rolled around, I was already tired. My joints were stiff, and standing too long in the kitchen wears me out more than I like to admit. I thought about skipping the family dinner, but I didn't want to break the tradition. So instead of cooking a big meal like I usually do, I decided we'd keep it simple. When everyone arrived, I told them, "Let's just order pizza tonight. No big fuss." Sarah gave me a smile and said, "That sounds perfect, Mom." She always tries to make things easier for me. She set her rolls and salad on the counter and started helping with plates without being asked. Ethan and Nora hung up their coats neatly and began setting the table. Those children are steady as a clock. Then Michael and Jessica walked in. Landon dropped his shoes in the hallway and went straight for the couch, kicking his feet up. Paige asked right away, "What's for dinner?" "I'm starving." Jessica swept in behind them, dressed like she was headed to a party, not a casual family night. When I mentioned pizza, Jessica perked up like she'd just been handed an assignment. "Great idea. Let's do it right. Michael, get a notepad." Michael pulled out a pen and paper from his pocket like he was taking orders at a fine restaurant. He leaned back in his chair, grinning. "Okay, kids, tell me exactly what you want." Landon didn't even look up from his phone. "Pepperoni and sausage. Double cheese. And make sure it's Marino's, not that cheap place." Michael nodded and wrote it down. "Paige, what about you?" Jessica asked. Paige twirled her hair. "Extra cheese, no sauce, stuffed crust, and breadsticks. With dipping sauce. Not garlic bread, the breadsticks." Michael wrote it carefully, like he was logging something important. Jessica gave her own order next. "Thin crust with artichokes, mushrooms, and olives. And get me a salad from there too." Michael added his request without hesitation. "Meat lovers large and wings on the side." I sat quietly through all this. I kept waiting for them to turn toward Sarah's children. Ethan and Nora sat patiently, hands folded on the table, whispering softly to each other. I could see Ethan's lips forming the word cheese. Nora was smiling at him, clearly deciding between veggie toppings or plain. They were ready to speak when asked, but the asking never came. Jessica shut her phone case and said, "That should do it." My chest tightened. I opened my mouth to say something, but before I could, Jessica looked straight at Sarah and said in a voice meant to carry across the room, "Your kids can eat whatever scraps are left in the kitchen. They're not guests here." The words landed like a slap. The room went silent. Sarah froze, her face drained of color. Ethan's shoulders sagged. Nora's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. They looked at their mother, confused, as if trying to understand why their aunt would say such a thing. Michael cleared his throat, but kept his head down. He didn't defend his sister. He didn't correct his wife. He just sat there, pen still in his hand, silent. I felt something break inside me. It was as if years of small slights, ignored comments, and brushed off insults had been building up, and this one sentence cracked the dam. My grandchildren, sitting there politely, were told they weren't even guests in their grandmother's home. I looked at Sarah. She reached for her children's hands under the table, squeezing them as though to say, "Don't let it get to you." But I could see the hurt written across her face. Ethan lowered his eyes to the tablecloth, fighting back tears. Nora blinked quickly, trying to stay brave. The air was heavy. Jessica flipped her hair back and carried on, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. Michael stayed quiet, glancing at his wife, and then back at his list. I sat there, trying to steady my voice, but my mind was loud with thoughts. I wanted to shout. I wanted to stand up and tell Jessica that no child in my home would ever be treated as less than another. I wanted to ask Michael why he had become so small, hiding behind silence when his own sister was being humiliated. But I didn't speak then. I swallowed my anger, though it burned. I kept my hands folded in my lap and let the moment pass on the surface, while inside I was making a decision. This wasn't just about pizza. It wasn't about who got pepperoni or stuffed crust. It was about dignity. It was about the way Sarah and her children had been treated for years, and how I had let it happen by biting my tongue. That sentence, "They can eat scraps, they're not guests here," was the last straw. It showed me clearly that my silence had been taken as approval, and that if I didn't act, nothing would ever change. I glanced at Sarah again. She was smoothing Nora's hair, whispering something to her, pretending everything was fine. Ethan sat stiff, his eyes glued to the floor. Those children deserved better. They deserved a grandmother who defended them, not one who looked away. So I sat quietly that night, but not because I was defeated. I was planning. I knew in that moment that this family dynamic would never continue the same way again. Dinner carried on in awkward quiet. Michael called in the pizza order without mentioning Ethan or Nora. Sarah kept her head down, feeding her children bites of salad and rolls she had brought, pretending it was enough. Jessica chatted about Landon's new sports club, Paige's lessons, all while ignoring the tension she had created. I nodded here and there, but my mind was somewhere else. My heart was pounding. I knew I had a choice. I could stay silent like always, or I could do something that would leave no room for doubt about where I stood. That night, as I cleared plates and said goodbye to each of them, I made my choice. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. But deep down, I promised myself this. No more silence, no more scraps, no more excuses. That dinner, with all its awkwardness and cruelty, became the turning point. Because once I heard those words in my own home, I knew I couldn't let them stand. I cleared a few plates after the pizza arrived, but I could barely touch a slice. My stomach was tight. Every word, Every silence from that evening sat heavy in my chest. Ethan and Nora picked at the rolls they had brought, pretending not to mind, but I could see the disappointment in their eyes. That was when I decided. Enough was enough. I leaned toward Sarah, kept my voice low, and said, "Go get your coats. We're leaving." Sarah looked at me, confused at first. "Mom." I said we're leaving. I repeated firmly. My voice wasn't angry. It was calm, steady. The kind of tone that doesn't leave room for argument. Ethan and Nora jumped up right away, sensing that I meant it. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She gathered their things quickly, her hands shaking just a little. Michael noticed us moving toward the hallway. "What's going on?" "Mom, where are you going?" He laughed nervously, like it was a joke. "You're not really upset about that, are you?" Jessica was just kidding. I turned and looked him square in the eye. "No, Michael." She wasn't kidding. "And I'm not staying." Jessica scoffed from the couch. "Oh, come on. Don't make this into a big deal." But I didn't answer her. I didn't owe her a debate. I took Sarah's hand, then Nora's, and led them to the door. Ethan carried the coats without being told. Behind us, Michael called out, "Mom, sit down. Don't be so dramatic. We'll eat in a minute." I ignored him. I had ignored enough already. When we stepped outside, the air was cool and fresh. I felt lighter the second the door closed behind us. Sarah looked at me as we walked to the car. "Mom, are you sure?" "I've never been more sure," I said. We piled into my car, and I started driving. The silence in the car was thick at first. Then Ethan whispered, "Grandma, are we in trouble?" I reached back and squeezed his hand. "No, sweetheart, we're not in trouble. We're going to dinner." Nora's eyes lit up. "Where?" I smiled. "How about the steakhouse?" Their mouths dropped open. Sarah gasped, "Mom, we don't need to." "Yes, we do," I said firmly. "Tonight, we are not eating scraps. We're going to sit down together, order what we want, and enjoy it." When we pulled up to the steakhouse, the kids could hardly believe it. Ethan whispered, "I've never been here before." Nora pressed her nose against the window. Inside, the hostess gave us a table right away. The kids sat up straight, excited but polite. I could see the wonder in their eyes as they looked at the menus. "Order whatever you like," I told them. Sarah tried to protest again. "Mom, this is too much." "No, it isn't," I said. "This is exactly what's needed." Ethan ordered a cheeseburger. Nothing fancy, just something he'd always wanted to try at a restaurant. Nora chose chicken tenders with mashed potatoes. Sarah picked a simple salad and steak tips. I ordered a ribeye because after the night we'd had, I wanted to taste something that reminded me life could still be rich. When the food came, Ethan's eyes widened. "This is the biggest burger I've ever seen." Nora clapped her hands when she saw the plate. We ate slowly, savoring every bite. The table filled with laughter, small jokes, and the kind of comfort that comes from being respected. I watched Sarah's face relax for the first time that evening. She looked across the table at her children and smiled. "See, kids, sometimes you just have to walk away from what's wrong." She didn't know how much those words echoed in my own heart, because sitting there with my steak in front of me and my family around me, I knew something had shifted. I wasn't just treating them to dinner. I was sending a message to Sarah, to her children, and most of all, to myself. This was the last time I would let disrespect slide by without a response. We finished our meal and even ordered dessert. Ethan and Nora giggled over the idea of splitting a sundae. Sarah tried to hold back tears more than once, and I knew they weren't from sadness. They were from relief. When the bill came, I paid it without flinching. Was it expensive? Yes, but it was worth every cent. Some things money can't buy, like dignity, but money can be used to make a statement. As we drove home that night, the kids were sleepy but smiling. Sarah turned to me in the car. "Mom, thank you. I didn't realize how much I needed that." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "You and those children will never be treated like second-class family again. Not while I'm here." The house was dark when I dropped them off. We hugged goodnight, and I headed home. As I walked into my quiet living room, I felt a kind of peace I hadn't known in years. Not because the problem was solved. It wasn't. But because for the first time, I had acted. I had walked away from the table where love was conditional and sat down at one where everyone was valued. And deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. Would you have had the courage to walk away from family and pay for that dinner just to prove a point? If you're nodding right now, show it with a like. And if you wouldn't, tell me in the comments why. I want to hear from you. The morning after that dinner, I woke up with my mind made up. I brewed my coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared out the window at my backyard. The grass needed mowing, the flower beds needed weeding, but I didn't care. I wasn't thinking about chores. I was thinking about legacy. I had always assumed I'd split what I had evenly between my children. That's what most parents do. It feels fair on the surface. But after what happened, I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Equal doesn't always mean fair. So I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, Mr. Harris. He's been handling my affairs since my husband died. A steady man in his 60s with a calm voice, he's never rushed me or made me feel foolish. When he answered, I told him I needed to make changes to my will right away. "Of course, Mrs. Flint," he said. "What do you have in mind?" I took a deep breath. "I want Michael removed as a direct heir. He will no longer inherit from me." There was a pause on the other end. "Removed entirely?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I've thought about this for a long time, but last night made it clear. I cannot reward disrespect." He didn't argue, but I could hear the scratch of his pen as he wrote it down. "And what about your estate? Do you want everything to go to your daughter?" "No," I said, "not exactly. I want to create an educational trust for my 4 grandchildren." "An educational trust," he repeated, his tone thoughtful. "Yes, it should cover tuition, books, living expenses, whatever they need to pursue higher education." "That's certainly possible," he said. "Do you want equal shares?" I hesitated, then spoke the words that had been building in my mind. "Not exactly equal. I want the funds to be available only if certain conditions are met." There was another pause. "Conditions?" "Yes. I want my grandchildren to maintain a perfect 4.0 GPA every year. And I want them to complete at least 100 hours of community service annually. If they fail to meet those standards, their share for that year will roll over to the others who do." The line went silent for a moment. Finally, Mr. Harris cleared his throat. "That's quite strict, Mrs. Flint." "I know it is," I said, steadying my voice. "But it's deliberate. I want to reward discipline and generosity, not entitlement. If my grandchildren want the privilege of this inheritance, they will have to earn it, not by being the loudest, not by being spoiled, but by proving they can excel and give back." He sounded cautious. A perfect 4.0 GPA is difficult to maintain, even for bright students. Illness, personal setbacks, even a single bad semester could cause them to lose their share. "Are you sure you want it that rigid?" "Yes," I said. "I've thought it through. If they are capable, they will rise to it. And if they aren't willing, then maybe the money will be better used by the ones who are." Mr. Harris sighed, softly. "Very well. It's your estate. My job is to put your wishes in writing. But I do need to warn you, this could cause conflict down the road." "I expect it will," I said, "but conflict is better than continuing a pattern of entitlement. I'd rather leave a hard lesson than leave nothing of value. He continued jotting notes. So, to confirm, Michael is removed as a direct heir. The estate goes into an educational trust for all 4 grandchildren with the following conditions: maintain a 4.0 GPA and complete 100 hours of community service annually. Any child who fails loses their share for that year, which rolls over to the others. That's correct, I said. I'll draft the documents this week, he replied. Once they're ready, I'll have you sign. When I hung up the phone, I sat back in my chair and let out a long breath. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't care. I felt a calm settle over me that I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I knew my will reflected my values. But even as I sat there, I knew not everyone would see it that way. Some would say I was being wise, teaching my grandchildren the value of education and service. Others would say I was being cruel, punishing children for the sins of their parents. And maybe they'd be right. Maybe it was too harsh. Maybe expecting perfection was unfair. But after years of watching my family fracture under favoritism and entitlement, I wanted something different. I wanted Ethan and Nora to know that their efforts mattered, that politeness, discipline, and kindness could be rewarded. I wanted Landon and Paige to understand that inheritance isn't automatic, that money isn't a birthright. It's an opportunity that comes with responsibility. Most of all, I wanted my silence to end. That night, lying in bed, I replayed Mr. Harris's words in my mind. That's quite strict. He wasn't wrong, but I didn't regret it. I thought about Sarah's children. Ethan, sitting straight-backed at school, careful with his homework, always trying his best. Nora, eager to help her classmates, drawing pictures for her teacher, comforting friends when they cried. I knew they could meet the challenge. And then I thought of Michael's children. Landon, who groaned at even the smallest chores. Paige, who complained if she didn't get exactly what she wanted. Could they meet it? Maybe, but only if they changed. Only if their parents taught them something different. And if they didn't, then so be it. I wasn't trying to punish. I was trying to correct, to send a clear message that the future I wanted for this family required effort and generosity, not arrogance. By the time I fell asleep, my decision was sealed. I knew it would cause waves. I knew Michael and Jessica would explode when they found out. But I also knew this. My will, my estate, my legacy, it was mine to shape. And I was shaping it to reflect the values I wished had guided my family all along. Do you agree with me setting strict rules for the inheritance? Or do you think I went too far? If you respect the idea that money should teach values, then subscribe right now because this channel is about tough choices like this one. It only took a week for the papers to be finalized. Mr. Harris called me to confirm that everything was signed and sealed. The certified letters will be mailed out tomorrow, he said. I knew what that meant. Within days, Michael and Jessica would see, in black and white, that everything they assumed was theirs had changed. 3 days later, my phone rang in the late afternoon. I glanced at the screen. Michael. I almost didn't answer, but I knew I had to. The moment I picked up, his voice came sharp and panicked. Mom, what is this letter from some lawyer's office? Are you out of your mind? It says you changed your will. I stayed calm. Yes, Michael. I did. I met with Mr. Harris last week and updated it. You cut me out. His voice cracked. The letter says, I'm not even a beneficiary anymore. How could you do that? I took a slow breath. Michael, I've thought about this for years. What happened last Sunday made it clear I couldn't ignore it anymore. My estate will go into a trust for my grandchildren's education. You are no longer a direct heir. For a moment, there was silence. Then I heard Jessica's voice in the background, sharp and furious. Let me talk to her. The phone rustled, And then Jessica came on. Anita, this is cruel. Absolutely cruel. You're punishing us for one little comment. And now you're punishing our children. How could you take their inheritance away? I didn't raise my voice. Jessica, I'm not taking anything away. I'm making sure my legacy goes to those who respect its value. She practically shouted, respect its value? They're children. They don't even understand what that means yet. Then this will teach them. I replied. She sputtered. What are you even talking about? I explained calmly, word for word, the conditions I had set. The money is in an educational trust. Any grandchild who wants to use it must maintain a 4.0 GPA every year and complete 100 hours of community service. If they don't, their share for that year rolls over to the others. Jessica gasped like I had slapped her. You're insane. Do you know how hard that is? A perfect GPA? Community service hours? What if one of them gets sick? What if one of them struggles in a subject? You're setting them up to fail. Michael came back on the line. His voice was tense, but softer than hers. Mom, this doesn't make sense. You've always said you loved us equally. Why would you do something that pits the kids against each other? Because I've spent years watching favoritism and entitlement grow, I answered. I will not leave behind a legacy that rewards arrogance. If they want this money, they'll have to earn it through discipline and generosity. That's the lesson I want remembered. Jessica cut in again, her tone dripping with anger. So Ethan and Nora, your precious Sarah's kids, get everything while ours get nothing. That's what this is about, isn't it? You're playing favorites. I held my ground. No, Jessica, I've included all 4 children equally, but they have to meet the same standards. The ones who work hard and give back will benefit. The ones who don't, won't. That's not favoritism. That's fairness. She laughed bitterly. Fairness? You call it fair to demand perfection? You've basically handed Sarah's kids a golden ticket and slammed the door in our kids' faces. I stayed steady. Jessica, whether your children succeed or fail isn't up to me. It's up to them, and to you and Michael as parents. If you teach them discipline and respect, they'll have just as much chance as Ethan and Nora. Michael was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. You're dividing the family, Mom. No, I said firmly. I'm drawing a line. There's a difference. Families should lift each other up, not tear each other down. What happened at dinner showed me the line had been crossed a long time ago. I should have stopped it years back. This is my way of correcting it. Jessica muttered something I couldn't quite make out, then shouted, You're punishing children for being children. No grandmother should do this. And no grandmother, I replied, should sit silent while her grandchildren are told to eat scraps. The line went quiet. I could hear Michael breathing hard, Jessica whispering angrily in the background. Then Michael said, I can't believe you do this to us. I believe, I said slowly, that one day you might thank me. Maybe not now, maybe not soon, but someday you'll understand why I had to set things right. Michael let out a heavy sigh. You've changed, Mom. No, I said. I've finally stopped staying quiet. He hung up without another word. I sat in my chair afterward, phone still in my hand. My heart was steady, but I knew the storm had only begun. Some would see what I did as strong, others as cruel, but I felt no regret. I wanted my grandchildren to grow up knowing that respect, effort, and kindness are worth more than any check. And if that made me the villain in Michael and Jessica's eyes, so be it. That letter had done its job. It forced the truth into the open. The phone stayed quiet for a few days after Michael's call. No texts, no messages. I figured he and Jessica were stewing. Honestly, I welcomed the silence. For the first time in years, I felt like I had taken control instead of letting things slide. It wasn't long before word got around, though. Sarah called me one evening, her voice careful. "Mom, I heard from Michael. He told me about the will." "Yes," I said. "It's true. I changed it." There was a pause. "He's furious." I expected that. I told her. Then she surprised me. "Mom, are you sure about the conditions? A perfect 4.0 GPA every year, and all those service hours? That's a lot of pressure. Ethan and Nora already work hard. I don't want them to feel like their worth is tied to being perfect." Her words were gentle, not accusatory. I thought about them for a moment. "Sarah, I understand your concern. But the truth is, life has conditions whether we like it or not. College scholarships, job promotions, opportunities, those things come with standards. I'd rather my grandchildren learn early that rewards follow effort, not entitlement." She sighed. "I see your point. I just don't want them to feel like they'll lose your love if they stumble." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. My love isn't tied to grades or hours of service. They'll always have that. The trust is separate. It's my way of making sure my legacy builds discipline and generosity. There was a long silence. Then Sarah said softly, "Thank you, Mom, for including all the kids. I know that wasn't easy." After that conversation, I felt steady again. Sarah understood, even if she worried. Michael, on the other hand, didn't try to hide his feelings. He called his sister and ranted so loudly she later repeated his words to me. "Mom's gone crazy," he said. "Nobody can keep up a perfect GPA forever. She's setting them up to fail. It's like she's dangling money over our kids' heads." But what struck me most was what Sarah said next. He never once mentioned Jessica's comment about the scraps. Not once. "It's like he doesn't even remember why you did this." That told me everything I needed to know. Michael wasn't angry because it was unfair. He was angry because the easy road had been closed. The grandchildren reacted differently. Ethan came over one afternoon with Sarah, and I asked him how he felt about it. He looked me in the eye and said, "Grandma, I'll do it. I'll keep my grades up. And I already help at the library, so I can get more hours." I felt tears sting my eyes. That boy had always been steady, but now I saw determination, too. Nora, on the other hand, frowned. "A 4.0 every year? What if I get one bad grade? That doesn't seem fair." I pulled her close. "Sweetheart, all you can do is try your best. The point isn't to scare you. It's to remind you that effort matters. You're smart and you care about others. That's exactly what I want this family to carry forward." She didn't look fully convinced, but she nodded. Landon and Paige didn't take it so well. Sarah told me they were sulking at home, complaining that I was playing favorites. "Grandma just wants Ethan and Nora to win." Paige pouted. Landon threw his hands up and said, "Forget it. I'm not wasting my weekends picking up trash just to get money later." When I heard that, I didn't get angry. I just shook my head. That attitude was exactly why I had made the change. Neighbors and extended family had their opinions, too. My sister-in-law called me after hearing from Jessica. "Anita, I heard you put impossible rules on your will. Why would you do that? You're going to divide your grandchildren." I answered her plainly. They were already divided. I'm trying to redirect them. If it works, great. If it doesn't, at least I tried. Some people thought I was harsh. Others told me privately that they admired my backbone. A friend at church patted my hand and whispered, "Good for you. Better they learn discipline now than waste everything later." Through it all, I stayed calm. I didn't argue with Michael. I didn't defend myself to Jessica. And I didn't second-guess my decision. The real shift I noticed was in Sarah. She started speaking up more. At the next Sunday dinner, yes, I still hosted, though Michael and Jessica stayed away for a while. Sarah corrected her children openly but kindly and praised them when they helped. She wasn't apologizing for them anymore. She carried herself with quiet confidence, as if my action had lifted a burden from her shoulders. Ethan and Nora seemed taller somehow, even though their bodies hadn't grown that much. I think they finally felt seen, and though Landon and Paige rolled their eyes when my name came up, I could sense the wheels turning. Maybe, just maybe, they'd start realizing that being the golden kids wouldn't be enough forever. The fallout was messy, but it was necessary. Families don't change without discomfort. And for the first time in decades, I felt like the ground under us was shifting, not back into the old ruts, but into something new. 6 months have passed since I signed that will. At first, I wasn't sure how things would settle, but time has a way of showing the truth. Sarah's children have surprised me, though I can't say I'm shocked. Ethan brought over his school report card not long ago. He laid it on my kitchen table with a grin that stretched ear to ear. "Straight A's, Grandma," he said proudly. Nora chimed in, and I finished my first 50 hours at the animal shelter. I'm going back this summer to finish the rest. I hugged them both so tight. Their hard work wasn't about the money anymore. It was about proving to themselves that they could rise to a challenge. Sarah still worries sometimes, telling me she doesn't want them to feel crushed by expectations. But I reminded her that these two children already had the drive in them. The trust simply gave them a goal to aim at. Michael's children have had a harder time. Landon sulked the first few months, insisting the rules were impossible. His grades slipped, and he gave up on even trying to keep them high. Paige bounced between bursts of effort and complaints. Jessica told anyone who would listen that I had set the bar so high on purpose just to shame her kids. That sparked a new round of family debates. Some relatives sided with Michael, saying I had been too harsh. Others quietly told me they admired my courage. It became the kind of topic people whisper about at gatherings, lowering their voices when I walk in. I don't mind. I knew this decision would stir people up, and maybe that was the point. Sometimes a family needs shaking if the next generation is going to grow stronger. The most telling part is that Michael still refuses to talk about the night that started it all. Not once has he acknowledged Jessica's comment about the scraps. He talks only about the will, as if that's the injustice, instead of the way his children were taught to treat their cousins. That silence speaks louder than anything he could say. I've thought a lot about legacy these past months. I don't have millions, but what I do have should mean something. I chose to place my faith in effort and generosity, not in entitlement. Whether that was right or wrong, only time will tell. Maybe some will say I was wise. Maybe others will call me cruel. But I can live with that because I finally acted on what I knew was true. The grandchildren are watching, and that matters more than what anyone whispers. Ethan and Nora are standing taller, believing their efforts matter. Landon and Paige may resent me now, but maybe one day they'll see that no one is handed respect. It's earned just like opportunity. I'm 70 now. I don't know how many years I have left, but I know I don't want to spend them biting my tongue. My family may be divided for a season, but at least they know where I stand. And when I'm gone, the words on that will won't just be instructions about money. There'll be a message that this family's future should be built on discipline, kindness, and giving back. Now, I want to ask you, the ones listening to my story, what would you have done? Would you ever put conditions on your will? Should inheritance reward character? Or should love be unconditional? Did I go too far or not far enough? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and share what you think. Your stories matter, too, and you never know who might find strength from reading them. If this story spoke to you, Please give it a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Every time you do, it helps these stories reach others who might feel alone in their struggles. Thank you for listening to mine.